to consider the Uganda People's Defence Forces Act Amendment of 2025. It is constituted by the Legal and Parliamentary Affairs Committee, where I sit and I'm the ranking member, and also the Defence and Internal Affairs Committee, which is the sector committee that deals with the Ministry of Defence and Internal Affairs. Some time back, I think it's over a year ago, the EPDF or the Ministry of Defence had proposed an amendment to the original act, which we enacted in 2005. However, as the committee was considering that act, the Supreme Court came up with that decision regarding the court martial. And in that decision, the Supreme Court made declarations. It also made what we call orders, and also made what I would call advisory orders. Advisory in the sense that the court was of the view that some aspects should be handled by both the executive or the army, the Minister of Defense more specifically, and also Parliament, to have the Uganda People's Defense Act conform to the Constitution of Uganda. It led to the withdrawal of the original bill, which was in Parliament, and then the Minister of Defense tried to get some aspects that touch especially the court martial to bring them in conformity with the new order, legal order of the Supreme Court. So originally the bill handled so many things, organs of the army, they had been changed. There's one thing which Honorable Ssemujju has been always talking about the last 4 years, about the status of the Special Forces Command, what is it in the year, and so on. So all those were now being regionalized, the reserve forces and so on. But the most important aspect of this bill, in my view, was the welfare of members of the Uganda People's Defense Forces and also those who have retired, the veterans, to have their pension away from public service to the Ministry of Defense. There are so many positive aspects, very, very many positive aspects about this bill. Unfortunately, there is only one issue which has brought everything into public discussion, and that is the way the act is seeking to implement the court decision, and more specifically about the trial of civilians in the court martial. So that is the controversy which is there. I have taken a conscious decision, well thought out decision, that I'm going to participate in this process from day one until it ends, to make my positive contribution to the improvement of this law, so that it does not come out as it is now. I'm not going to shout at anybody. I'm going to talk to people. I'm going to talk whoever is concerned, and I have been in that committee from the first minute up to the end until they close, and I'll be there until this thing ends.
Inshallah.
Inshallah, of course.
and you know, I framed today's topic as the good, the bad, and the ugly, but of the reform. But the good includes overdue reforms regarding pensions,
yes,
for service people, professional courts martial. Those are good things.
Yes, absolutely. For example, pension. The other day we received a group of veterans called the RIF. RIF is RIF. It was a reduction in force in 1992, I think, as a result of the donor demand when they asked the government to reduce the forces. Many of those people had not served the mandatory 10 years in the army, so they would not qualify for the proper pension and so on. And they were getting 7,000 a month.
Shillings?
Yes. But by the time it goes through the banks, actual is 3,000. That's what they are getting. And these are veterans, and they didn't leave the forces because of age. They didn't leave because they are resigned, but they were cut off. You get some of them thought they needed a career in the military, and they had started serving, but because of the donor demand, they were cut off. And people are getting 3,000, 1, 2, 3, and I'm like, which country is this are we living in? So that is one of the aspects that are being addressed by this bill, and of course with details and so on, how there's a new formula for calculation of the pension, how to look after these guys and so on, which is better for the servicemen. And I think we need to handle a little bit of many other aspects of the bill.
Okay, Honorable Ssemujju, before we come to Honorable Dombo here, some of the ugly is the of course, Abdul has mentioned it, returning civilians to court. That's part of the ugly, but also this bill to the rush around the bill. What is the reason for that?
Asking because you want an answer.
Yes. We
Oscar,
have two active parliamentarians here.
Closer to the approach the Abdu has taken. Around 2000 to 2000 something, when the Honorable Mama was Minister for Defense, the British sponsored the professionalization of the army. A lot of research was done, leading to the enactment of the UPDF Act that they are now seeking to change. White paper was written, they had meetings. Remember one time, it must have been Andrew Mwenda who reported about those meetings where the generals were standing on table, quarreling over. So eventually the UPDF Act is done. At that time, providing for units and so on and so forth. But I think this one was replacing either the Army Act, something like that.
Yes.
So yeah. In one of the meetings of the High Command in Entebbe, at that time, the Joint Chief of Staff, I think must have been Robert Rusoke, Brigadier, and as they are concluding this process, whose aim was to build a professional army, discipline, Museveni tells them that I am creating a special force. Rusoke, I am told by the senior officers who were in the meeting, told him, sir, that will undermine everything that we have done. Everywhere you have an elite sort of a force within a force, like the Republican Guards in Iraq, in Iran and elsewhere, you are creating two standards. And Museveni, after his long lecture, he said, anyway, I was just giving information that we'll have a special force. And eventually the special force, Museveni's protection unity became the special force, growing from 500 when he had just captured power to a brigade, to a division, to now numbers that nobody knows. And I have been complaining because SFC has been operating illegally. They, just for people who are listening, one time when they were doing the organogram of the army, they put the CDF and then below him put the commanders of the forces, the Air Force and the Land Force, and put SFC. I asked Kiryoowa, who was the minister, to tell me, because you had now elevated the SFC to a level of Land Force and Air Force. I asked him the legal status. He said, okay, we'll go and consult and come back. I never came back. So and that brings me, that background was important to bring me to a point that I want to make. That there has always been a desire by Museveni to create an army within an army. And he kept saying it. I remember the Honorable Salam Musuma was chairing a committee on presidential. They went to meet Mr. Museveni in Soroti during the time of Konye. And he told them that, in fact, starting from the beginning, he used to call the UPDF Saleh's army and his army. Then he told them that your army has failed. Now I have deployed my army. Konye is going to be finished. You can ask Salam Musuma and those who are serving on the committee on presidential. So he has always wanted to create an army within an army. I think now he has emerged. So there is only now one army, his army. The one of Sare, and your army has eventually now been retired. It is now the Museveni army with his son in command. So the point I want to make, Oscar, before I answer the question you asked, is that a lot of money was spent in professionalization of UPDF. There was an attempt to build a national army. That has now gone away. It's gone up in flame. What you now have is a Museveni army, the Sare army and UPDF is gone. And the worst thing is that Museveni does things different. Even when he's doing bad things, he doesn't do them recklessly. He leaves room to doubt whether it is him or not. Now his army he has handed over to his son, who thinks that to be a leader must be like Kagame, who tweets that Kagame has killed more people than I have. I also need to begin killing to match up with my uncle.
Has he actually said that?
He has. Didn't you read that tweet?
No.
He said Kagame had killed over and said I want to kill more. But is there anything that Mose cannot tweet, Oscar, for you even to ask whether he has tweeted it? Is there anything? So this bill... He
has published today that he wants to tweet you, so...
It's okay.
I'm your protector.
So because Museveni has been doing two things, assembling a political infrastructure that creates some false hope, but also building an army for both regional but also internal to do politics. Now, the political infrastructure is slowly being replaced by the military. So the decision is the Annam was not these NRM caucuses, the Dome was going to Chankwa, so that nonsense is going to stop. So the rush now, first there are two things. You have Parliament, the 4 years of Parliament, we are ending our 4th year, and there are usually ceremonies and so on and so forth, budget, state of nation address, but also the campaign itself. So everything that you want to do now, you want to rush it before these things begin. So in fact, I am surprised that they delayed. They were supposed to have passed this long ago. There is NRM caucus in Entebbe on Monday, because some of the MPs are also uncomfortable because they know Museveni. I've told people Museveni is like a lion. When he's angry, he will eat anything around him. So sometimes you think it is Ssemujju, but Ssemujju is in Chazanga. If it is you around, you will be the one to be devoured by Museveni. So the rush is partly because of that. But also, I think Museveni looks now at Parliament as a machine. When you switch it off, so you don't have to waste your time, because he doesn't think that MPs are going to read this law and pass it because they have understood it. We are going to pass it because he has switched them on. So you guys pass my law.
Let's go to Mr. Emmanuel Dombo. Ssemujju is against the bill without actually quoting.
Yeah, but if you allow me a second, and I hope the Abdus will, because I don't understand why the reserve force should become now a force. Are you guys going to pay the soldiers who are, because the reserve force as it is today, it has soldiers who have retired. You are now going to make it formal in the law.
Then you'll answer that.
So you're going to give them money.
You'll give an answer. So for you, I need to ask some aspects of the bill seeking to make a monopoly over plain ordinary suits and choosing colors and having an ordinance on that.
The beret is okay. It's here in the law.
Well, the boots are also theirs, and do these things need a debate?
Oscar, I want first and foremost to thank my colleagues, especially the current members of Parliament, and Honorable Abudu Katuntu. I've listened to him on TV, and he has just made the public declaration here that he wants to use his vintage position in age, experience, and also knowledge in the law, so that he helps Parliament come up with a good law. That's what members of Parliament are supposed to do. And for the period I was in Parliament, we always attempted to do that. But the coming of this law,
What happened?
the coming of this law is, first of all, the law that is being amended. You have heard the Honorable Ssemujju telling you that even the professionalization of the army was funded by our colonial masters. Why? Because of our inability to raise the funds, because of lack of professional competencies at that time. NRA was a ragtag army which was formulated in the bush and came and overtook government, and now they had professionalized. Professionalization considers a number of things, including the training, the equipment, but also the administration and structure of the army. I'm very sure if we had the resources that we have now as a country, perhaps at that time all the things that Honorable Ssemujju is talking about could have been taken into consideration. But also, we are not in a static world. We're in a world where technology is changing, where the problems and the enemies we're dealing with are changing and reformatting. Therefore, there is no way you're going to have a static law and a static nature of running an institution like the military at a time when the other paramilitary forces may also want to emerge within the country. Then the final thing which nobody is trying to address, which I want to mention here before I talk about the uniforms, is that the onus or the responsibility usually, once a president has been sworn in, there are some political actors who want to treat President Museveni and the NRM as if we are constantly in competition with the other parties that are not in government.
That's how you present.
That's what it is.
That's what it is.
Because immediately the president wins an election and the party takes over the administration and government is allowed to fund the manifesto of the party using the taxpayers' money. Now the responsibility of maintaining public order in the country shifts to the hands of what they would call their opponent, who has a direct responsibility to ensure that order must be maintained. And this is the order which some of the people wanted to discredit, because until now, this is one of the strongest points which Uganda shows around. That's why you see refugees running from all these countries which are very stable and coming back here to the country. So because President Museveni and the NRM administration has a responsibility of maintaining stability in the country, it will use the instruments that are available to it, including legislation to ensure that public order is maintained, to ensure that there is sanity in the country, and to ensure that the people of Uganda are protected and they enjoy the peace and everything that they want. But in order to do that, they must do it conscious that we have an elected parliament, which is the representative of the people and must have ample time to deal with the law in accordance with the constitution, but also in accordance with other laws that exist, including taking into consideration court judgments which have been done. Now, the way I look at this law is that many people have stopped reading the the bill and what has been proposed, and they have reduced it to a political contestation. I've been listening to a number of talk shows from various media stations, and I've listened to people argue that this bill is targeting, when you talk about the Kaunda suits and the red berets, that's purely targeting NUP and targeting the other. It's the responsibility of the members of parliament to ensure that they make it in such a way that even if it was the NRM that came up tomorrow with berets that offend the law, then the law takes charge of that. Why should it only be seen as if the law is targeting National Unity Platform when we have people like Atutu who are in parliament and they can ably rely on the history but also their knowledge and wisdom to ensure that we make a universal law which must apply to the members of the National Resistance Movement just as to the members of the National Platform or any other.
Yeah, but Honorable Dongo, you know there's been a history of this, especially within the NRM government. You remember the case of Amama Mbabazi, how his own law caught him out eventually. So when you have laws that are targeting people, they might eventually end up with you.
Members of parliament don't get immune against the traffic laws even when they pass the traffic laws. If they become members of parliament and they drive carelessly, the very tax laws which they drive, which they have made, will definitely get hold of them. We have, I have my brother, who was my friend and personal doctor, Dr. Bulamu. We were in parliament with the late Dr. Bulamu, and we made a law about authorizing verification of the papers. Well, with him the previous day for higher education, certifying the papers if you did not go through the HSC system in Uganda. After he passed the law, he went back home prepared for nominations and never went for certification. And when he came for nomination, and coming for nomination on the last day
with his Russian degree, he was reminded that the law had been passed, and he said, yes, I attended and we passed the law. I said, but you have not certified. And he was struck off. I think his opponent passed and opposed. No, there were many others, but what happened? Because you see, he went for nomination the last day. And he was in Iganga. And the certification takes around 2-3 days.
In Kampala.
In Chambogo.
So, I've had this argument, especially from members of the opposition. I want to remind everybody that when you go to make a law in parliament, you make a law for the people of Uganda, and once that law gets you, even when you have left parliament or when you are still there, you are not immune because you are a member of parliament. There are some liberties that are within the liberties of members of parliament. You don't be arrested when you are going to parliament. You be arrested, they must notify the speaker. Those are privileges that are extended to members of parliament. At times they don't work, but the law is universal to every Ugandan, and let the Katutus consolidate the law so that whether it is a member of NRM, whether it is a member of the opposition, once you are caught on this offside of the law should take hold of you.
Yeah, but Oscar, I think my brother Emmanuel is missing the point. What is the people's cause? I didn't even start with the right honorable Mama. It started even in the 60s. During the time of the deportations and so on, and then the arrest of the famous cabinet arrest of ministers from cabinet room. The principle is make a law in good faith.
Yeah.
That's the principle. If you make a law in bad faith, fate has it that it may end up with you. That's what the concern. That's the concern of the people. Make a law in good faith. Don't make a law which touches Rumala, because tomorrow you never know. You could be in Rumala's position, and if you have made that law in bad faith, then fate has caught up with you. Yeah. I think that is the point you're trying to make.
That's a good point for you to come in, Raymond, because I see you as a conscientious thinker. Whatever Honorable Dombo might say, a lot of people will think, in addition to what Honorable Ssemujju has said, that there's a rush because they want to get someone like Dr. Kiza Besige to that court. So rush is important. Describing the attire and the colors, that one is targeting a political party that is about to start campaigns. And then there's a challenge by the Uganda Law Society and the East African Court of Justice on it. So, but when you have this kind of rush, all these things are suspect. Would you agree?
Definitely. My understanding and the reason the law itself is coming up is that the Supreme Court challenge is the one that led us here. But I think it's folly of us to imagine that the political realities today are only starting now. I mean, if I look back when our friends in UPC were in government, they created, out of the Ugandan Army, they created something called the General Service Unit. That General Service Unit eventually became the State Research Bureau, which clamped down on many of the political operatives of the UPC. if I look back from the UPC and say the Buganda Kingdom, I think some of the first kings, the Mwangas, created the Bambowa, and there was even a distinction between Islamic Bamboga and Christian Bamboga, and that led to the overthrow of Mwanga himself. So I would advise our politicians to look into our political history, because our political history is very instructive. Tomorrow the FDC might come into power and use the Very Special Forces Command to rain terror on members of the NRM. So for us who are civilians and citizens who don't belong to the political class, oftentimes you struggle with the political class and you struggle with their understanding of history and where we are going. But you also struggle with the understanding of the realities that they live in. I think we can't deny that we are within the political reality that a transition is happening. How it happens, whether it happens constitutionally or extra-constitutionally, outside the judicial processes, is a matter that's out of our hands. So because of that murky transition, we have been led into this politics where factions fighting for power are exercising, each of them is exercising their power separately. Some people have social power and they're exercising that. Other people have military power, they're exercising that. Other people have political power, they're exercising that. And the people for whom these things are visited upon, like us, the civilians, tomorrow morning, for example, I'm not sure if I should wear black boots. I'm not sure if I should ask my OC station, are these shoes fit to walk? Those things affect the general civilian populations of Uganda. So a law, whether you make a law that targets Abdu Katuntu, at the end of the day it will tame the behavior of Raymond and tame the general behavior of everyone. But I also immediately realized that I watched the Attorney General yesterday make some concessions. One of those concessions is that the army has agreed that insignia of the army is what will determine what constitutes military stores. So whether it's boots that you're wearing, they must be boots that have the insignia of the UPDF. Whether it's the military uniform you're wearing, you must have insignia on it that's a military uniform. And the law itself has, I think, an appendix that shows you that insignia.
You're saying if it has the army insignia, that's the one that will be illegal?
Yes, that will fall into military stores. But until we can see that in the law, because the law as is written now doesn't reflect that, until that is added into the law, we still have to wait. But also maybe to say this fight between the army or the people that have military control and civilians, it looks like it's a fight that has plagued Ugandan states for years. The first states within this civilization we call Uganda, Buganda for example, struggled a lot between the militaries of Buganda and the civilians who are living in Buganda. My own kingdom, where I come from, as you know this, Oscar, we seceded from Bunyoro Kingdom, and we had 9 years of contentious military battles with the Bunyoro Kingdom and the Abarusura. The British Army, when they came here, they used the force of the King's African Rifles to force Buganda Kingdom into an agreement. Then they used the Nubians to force the Ankole and Toro kingdoms into agreement. So it looks like it's an outstanding fight between militaries and civilians. And I think it's a defining political moment in Uganda's history. So I want to advise our politicians to step back and say, this is not politics as usual. This is a defining moment. It is not true that if the civilians win over the military, even in parliament, that the military will respond. And I think we've seen that before. In 1966, for example, the civilians had their day and the military responded. And when it responded,
Raymond, even now, the military has responded to the last time when the court martial were declared illegal.
Exactly.
But they've not released the people who been convicted. So.
Exactly. And I struggle also because when I look around other countries, I see countries like Egypt, which have now gone into almost their 12th year of military dictatorship. I see countries like Sudan, now split. I think there is a country called Sudan, but the contestation there has continued.
Yes.
So this is
all because the military persisted.
Yes. So I don't know if we have, our skilled politicians, someone should be able to say this is a defining political moment. Let us first put away our political differences and deal with it as you would for the future of Ugandans. Because I'm 31, I might be in this country for the next 30 years, and I wouldn't want.
Looking around this table, you might live a little bit longer.
Yes. I wouldn't want to have 10 or 15 years in which we go back to having a military contestation over political affairs. So I think we need a defining political moment, and if this is the defining political moment, then we need to put aside some differences, and we need to understand some realities which exist. So, for example, I don't think that you can wish away the Special Forces Command. I don't think you can. Even though there are problems with the constitution of the Special Forces Command or its leadership, I think looking at Uganda's neighbors and how all of them have their own separate special forces, it's unlikely that you can wish away an elite force. I also don't think that you can wish away the general.
It's clear that you will not have that special force.
Yeah.
But you'll be there. That will not
Even before the law, it is there.
Yeah. So you can't wish. Yes, you can't wish it away because military science has evolved now. Even the advanced democracies have their own special forces command. You have the UK with their Green Berets, you have the US with their Navy SEALs. You can't wish that away, that there will be an elite command within the army that responds to the realities of that army.
Absolutely.
So those are some of the concessions that can be made. But I don't think that on things like military wear, I think there should be some concessions there. I think those are concessions where civilians can say it should be okay to wear a beret. You shouldn't feel bad if you find a civilian wearing a beret.
Abdul, talk about those pair of shoes and what you're going to do with them. Is it 3 or 4 pairs?
There are so many things. You need to look at the act itself. What it has the bill, what has provided 100 and just 1 second. I think it is provided for 106 pictures of what should constitute military.
Is that normal when you're presenting a bill, even include pictures?
Oh yes, because they are gazetted ones, so that the public knows that these are now part of the stores. We have objections to quite a number, and having that conversation with the Learned Attorney General yesterday in the committee, he seemed to have agreed with us on 1 or 2, 3 issues. We are going to be examining one by one to see which one should be a monopoly really of the UPDF. Because you see, Oscar, there are things we have been wearing. We don't want the UPDF to come and grab them from us because they have been part of the civilian attire and so on. However, I'll give you an example. When you look at pictures 53, 54, 55, 56, these are their ranks. You get it? Of lieutenant generals, these red things with the yellow gold linings in between them. Yeah, these are real ranks of the UPDF, and I don't think civilians should be using them. Because we want to enact a law, but also with common sense.
Yeah.
You get it? You can't enact a law for purposes of politics. It doesn't make sense to me. So there are things really which we think should be the UPDF monopoly. And we've examined everything.
What's acceptable and what may
be for
acceptable.
example, they bring counter suits. So long as the counter suit is of these blues, there are 2 blues here, then there's a coffee counter suit here and so on. These are ordinary colors and counters that have been worn by people. So we want to see the logic of the UPDF monopolizing a coffee counter. No, counter is defined like a matching top and so on. Really, there are some things which we will have to change. They also go to gumboots, for example, and there is a green gumboot here, I think. And they said that is now a monopoly of the UPDF. You cannot be seen, just an ordinary gumboot, which people are wearing all over the place and so on. So I think we need to look at this. There are other sections, Oscar, which are quite important. And I've asked this question. When you look at clause 7 of the bill, it provides that members of the High Command on the 26th of January 1986, whose names are set out on Schedule 3 to this Act, provided that the member has not been convicted of any criminal offense or charged or changed citizenship or has not joined active partisan politics, they will be members of the Uganda People's Defense Forces High Command. And I'm saying, first of all, it is bad legislation to legislate for particular individuals that Emmanuel Odombo will be a member of the High Command until he dies. It doesn't make common sense. Because this is not even military. This is not law. It is not common sense.
But when you take it further, what if they all die? Then there's no High Command.
No. There are others. It's a category.
Okay.
Yeah. And my suggestion is, really in good faith, many of these people played a role, especially in the war that brought the NRM to power. We've since then awarded them medals. They have since then retired. They are now old men. The NRA at that time has since then metamorphosized into what we call the UPDF. Allow these gentlemen and ladies to rest. They are in their retirement. They can now not be burdened. But because they participated in this struggle, they can't be burdened with army responsibility until they die. Just imagine somebody is being lucky enough to live up to 100 years. And he comes from Karamoja, in AC, it said he's come to attend a High Command meeting. It doesn't make sense to me. So we are speaking something for the interest of the army and for the interest of we have now new young people, men and women, professional lawyers, whatever professional, who are managing the army currently. Let them carry their responsibility. Those people who played their role, they did. The country has awarded them. We've given them very good pension. The generals were given very good ex gratia when they were leaving. Those who have retired, let them go do farming, look after their great grandchildren. They have lives to live after the army. So that is one of the areas we are looking. I am thinking I should bring the attention of my colleagues to. Then
if you look at it the other way, the design of the law might be to keep them as members of the service until they pass on.
No,
because
there is another
them outside of service.
No. That one, it is covered for under clause 3, which talks of the reserve force. Clause 2 actually. Because that is a pool. These guys who have served, ex-servicemen, that is a pool from which you can pull the reserve force as and when they are needed. But they are retired. So that is catered for, not this particular one. Then Oscar, when you go to this contentious thing about the court martial, because everybody is court martial and so on. This bill, they are around 80 something clauses, and the court martial has only 4. Only 4. So, but they seem to be the most important for public discussion. 2, we are now providing that there is going to be a cross appeal now. That decisions of the general court martial will not end in the court martial. It can now be appealed to the civilian courts. We had the debate whether you are from the general court martial, you appeal to the High Court or the Court of Appeal. Because eventually the bill was appointing the Court of Appeal. And that we agree in principle that now the general court martial will not be the end of people who are being prosecuted in the court martial. You can appeal to the ordinary courts.
For service officers?
Yes, all offenses. And that's what it should be. Because you see, one, you move out of a system which, if you say I have been unfairly treated by this system, prosecuted and so on. So let us have the second chance of examining what the military court system did. And at the appellate level, not trial level.
Okay.
Oscar, that means that if a general court martial takes a decision, that decision is appealable to the Court of Appeal, where 3 judges will look into it. And even that, we are providing that automatic right of appeal to the Supreme Court. That is an innovation now, because it hasn't been there.
But maybe, Honorable Abdul, on the clauses that concern the General Court Martial, I don't have it off head, but I was reading it. There's a clause there on the exceptional circumstances a civilian can be tried.
Yes.
I think a sub-clause should be added to explain clearly what exceptional circumstances are, because if it remains an open and vague,
and that's what the courts decided. After they say that civilians to be, by the way, contrary to what people say, the court did not say that civilians cannot be tried by the court martial. It didn't say that. Actually, it said it is possible. However, it said it is only in rare exceptional circumstances. So the burden we have now is to define the clear exceptional circumstances as envisaged by the Constitution, but also taking into account the court decision.
However,
because they went into details.
However, Abdul, is there any situation that the regular court cannot charge a civilian?
Which one?
Is it necessary to go to the court martial? Doesn't a regular court cover everything?
Okay, no. Let's do this. First of all, court martials are not unique to Uganda. All professional armies all over the world have court martials. So it is about the universality. It is there because this is a unique institution, Oscar, and I want us to appreciate it. The circumstances where, for example, when you aid and abet, I don't know whether when I say aiding and abetting, I'm speaking English or law.
Yes, you're speaking English.
Both. Okay. If, for example, Oscar, there is a Major Lumala who is committing a service offense, and a certain civilian Abdul Katuntu has aided Major Lumala in the commission of the and abetted this case, the commission of the case, then of the offense, then you cannot have double trials. That you get Katuntu, you take them to a civilian court on the same facts, then you get Lumala, you take him to the military. So when you aid and abet, let me tell you, that could take you to the other side. You get it. However, to me, that is not my concern. My concern and everybody's concern should be weaponizing the court martial. That, you see, we are going into this conversation and we miss out, Oscar, the complaint. The complaint is, and I pleaded with the UPDF officers who are there, that they are the ones causing us all these problems. Because they have now weaponized the court martial. If there's a problem with the Ssemujju here, they will manufacture something which takes Ssemujju to what? To the court martial. And by the way, Bruce here also now. So, Oscar, that is, in law we call it the mischief. That's where the mischief is. That the court martial has failed to do what it's supposed to do under the law, and it has been weaponized to handle sometimes political problems. That's where the problem is. It is not about the law, whether the civilians here and so on and no. And if the court martial can do what we call soul searching, so we have caused this problem because of ABCD, so they should just be more professional. The good news is all these guys are lawyers, well-trained lawyers. You get it? And we are asking them to act professionally. Oscar, the court martial has always been there, by the way.
Yeah.
But why is it that it is even of late that we have a public uproar? Because of late, they have really degenerated into a political institution, and that's where the problem is. But once they act professionally, I don't think we'll have some of these problems we are seeing today.
Honorable Ssemujju,
yeah, you see,
coming to you, before I take umbrage on what Abdu is saying, that the court can consider for itself, whereas we have MPs that should consider and determine. Angela Izama posts here that the main issue is the extent of civilian oversight over the army. How does this bill speak to this issue? And gives an example. Does it also matter that military leaders continue to disregard lawful orders from civilian authorities? Is your discussion in Parliament looking at that? Then my other question to you is, Abdu has pointed out very in legalese way what we should worry about.
Well, I was speaking plain English. There's nothing legalese about this.
But I could ask Ssemujju directly. For you, what is there, without going back into other history and relating to what's there, what should we be scared of from this?
You see, the context, Oscar, here is very important. Mr. Museveni, even at the beginning of this parliament, he was persuading NRM MPs to change the constitution to remove bail. In the meetings they had with him, some of them, by the way, spoke very well and forcefully. They told him under the constitution, you are the only one who cannot be arrested. All of us are candidates. We are therefore not going to allow you to remove bail, and then you begin, and God is very good. Within a few months, you had NRM MPs arrested that they were soliciting money during budget processing. One of them actually who spoke forcefully before Museveni, I'm not even sure whether Museveni was not revenging on him. The Honorable Akamba. He gets arrested. After getting arrested, court grants him bail, and is grabbed by by people who are in civilian. Later Museveni said he's the one who had ordered. And I think it was very good that the NRM MPs got to be treated that way. Can you imagine Kutana going to court asking bail, and he says, the way I see the weather outside.
The weather outside is not
I am not going to process bail.
The clouds were
Yes, I'm not going to process bail. So on that occasion, the NRM, but the point I'm making, Oscar, is that the context is that Museveni doesn't want bail given. So if he doesn't want bail given, these courts are under immense pressure to give bail. So the only court that is not under pressure is the military court. And then two, he was accusing these ordinary courts of delays, and he wanted to create an alternative justice where they try you very quickly. Like basically, you are supposed to have been tried in 2 weeks and sentenced to death. Since then, when they told them you transfer the file to civilian court, they don't have evidence. We in Naka, when they were applying, we need BSG's phone to begin collecting evidence. So which means in court martial, they did not need evidence. They were just going to convict him. So that context must because that's the intention. Sometimes I'm told in courts of law, even the intention of the framers becomes part of the processing. The judges will look at the intention. What was the intention? So Oscar, having said that, I'm coming quick. So the other aspect that Honorable Abdul spoke about of the NRM people who are supposed to be members of the High Command, I have seen they have made a change here, which is good. That to be, if you are in Ruwero and you're a member of High Command, you remain High Command till you die. They have said, if you have not changed the citizenship. Do you know that in the law, we had Ruwejema? First, he was dead, but two, he has also gone to Rwanda. But he was part of the High Command, and Kagame was part of the council. So they are citizens of another country, but they are members of the structures of our military, just because they were in the war fighting. Then coming
and
to
at some time we've been at loggerheads with the other country.
Yeah. So coming to the issues that we should worry.
Is Mugisha Mont also a member?
Yeah, Mugisha Muntu is a member of the council.
That's a tricky question.
Is a member of the council, not the high command, but a member of the council. I think now they have said he will no longer be, because they said if you participate in partisan politics, they move you.
He excessively uses
the points Abdu mentioned here, we deal with the context even in the application of the law. Abdu, as our former shadow attorney general, was in a meeting with Rugunda and Nanda, people who were leading us in parliament at that time, to try to interpret sections of the Public Management Act that deliberately Kaihura was misinterpreting to say he has powers to grant permission to hold a rally and so on and so forth. But the debate didn't start with the interpretation. We warned everybody during the consideration of the law in parliament that the moment you pass it the way it is, we are in trouble. They said no. And they spoke very well. That no, you see, it happens everywhere. In UK, they also regulate rallies, what. That universality is always applied by mafia to make everybody believe that their motivation is not bad. And the law was made. Thank God I was dragged out of parliament by police. They were referring me, Mama Mbabas wanted me to be taken to the disciplinary committee. And I thank God that the very first person to be arrested under the public management was Mama Mbabas. I
have Kaseja here saying, don't be duped by those good things in the bill.
Yeah, so the intention for me, it doesn't matter what, the moment you give them something to hang on, even if it is one word, not even a sentence, that is civilian in exceptional circumstances, even if you define them, now you'll begin quarreling with them. But this one does not follow in the category that is in the law. So let's civilian. Oscar, I was helping Brigadier Ssemujju to write his autobiography. He told me under the Uganda, I don't know, the one of Obote was which army? The first Obote government.
Uganda Army. The independence government.
Yes.
The independence government, no, but the independence government. Uganda Army.
Brigadier Ssemujju told me they faced an insurgency in Rwenzori. And he said we went to put off and put down that rebellion. But as a standard procedure, we're also moving with the police unit in our area. Each insurgent that we arrested, we are handing over to police because they are the ones who are responsible for that. As early as that, that's how the army was behaving. Where is the appetite that 40, 60 years later, you can't do things that were done at independence? And Brigadier Ssemujju is there, ask him.
The enemy has changed, everything has changed.
So Vestige is worse than people who are in Rwenzori holding guns. So really, these things, Oscar, the intention is not that they want to fight crime. The intention is that they now must clamp down on the opposition. That's why stupid things are found their way in the law. Kaunda suit, boots. Really, in this century, Dombo, in other countries, even military uniform are sold and people put them on.
Yeah.
For you, the universality is in what?
Even the guns, some countries.
Yeah, so NRM MPs, Oscar, all of them, they were in Chankwans. Museveni gave them 2 sets of uniform. They have them.
Seriously?
Yes.
Also, you don't wear and live there. You come back with
so you go for no poor just going in Chiembe here in Kampala to
get ready.
And you leave all NRM MPs, ministers have 2 sets of UPDF, not even, they have the one of training and the ceremonial uniform. You saw the minister, Lilian Abe. She was putting on a uniform like the one of SFC.
Did she say she had borrowed?
It doesn't matter whether you have borrowed. You saw my friend Mwenda putting on a uniform. Why do you arrest people of Bered and then you don't arrest Mwene? You don't arrest Lilian Abe. You don't arrest all the NRM MPs. If you raided them, I can tell you, they all returned with those uniforms. So the issue is not that these guys are troubled by people possessing military store or military. They simply want to deal with the opposition, but pretending that everybody does.
Raymond. What should
even
we
Dombo has a uniform. He was in the Chankwans this one here.
Well, Raymond, I'll tell you more about the General Service Unit.
Yes.
Dombo has a
Because I am
military
a son
uniform.
of
This
the
one, he should be
General
arrested after the show.
It's a very interesting outfit.
He has 2 pairs.
But
I don't know whether he got two, but I am sure he has one because I saw him in a uniform in Chankwan's.
He doesn't know that when
am.
I was in Chankwan's, I was a little
My
bit
dad
smaller.
was
It no longer fits me, so it remains.
I don't think it becomes illegal if it's not fitting you.
But his shoes, he has the shoes as well. So I can confirm that he does have.
The uniform he has also.
And 2 pairs of shoes. Yeah.
Military.
Ofono Pondo has many.
Maybe Oscar, the question we need to ask is
Oscar, can we borrow me and you?
No, I don't marry.
I wanted to say maybe we should go back
has a military
to
number,
probe
so
the
he's
politics.
a reserve force.
The politics behind the law. I think that's where the heart of the debate is. I don't think in the history of Uganda ever that the collapse of a political order has left the military order. So everywhere the political order has collapsed, the military order has followed. So both parties need each other. Our politicians need the army needs our politicians. So now we need to probe the politics. I hear us say things like we need to depoliticize the UPDF. In its conception, from the get-go, it's a very political army. So how are we going to achieve that depoliticization? Where are the limits of the depoliticization? I think those are the contentious political debates that we need to have. Somebody needs to ask the probing question. If you're the founding father of the UPDF, I mean, yes,
Because we have a new constitutional order. Yes, it is true. The NRA was MNRA.
yeah.
But from 1995, we have a new constitutional order, and it clearly defines that.
And that's the law.
And unfortunately, yes, unfortunately,
They've been singing ideology and
yes,
You see, people who are committing a crime in Ruwero, overthrowing a government. For overthrowing a government, they became members of the High Command and put their names in the law.
And they're boasting.
Yeah,
that's
not
the
that they had
political
served the
outcome.
army in the government.
Go on, Raymond.
So the bigger worry for me is that one, that we have democratic aspirations, like Abdul Katuntu has mentioned, with our constitutions, but when our political realities show up, all these laws look like fanciful things that we have on the books. And I think the political debate would help for people to say, can we settle this matter once and for all? If the army wants to participate in politics, to what end do you want to participate? Where are the limits? If the civilians want the army to stop at specific areas within political engagement, where are those limits? But I think for as long as the founding father of the UPDF is still a participating partisan politician, it's unlikely that you can detach our army from the politics. And because we can't detach our army from the politics, we now have to deal with it as it is in our politics. We can't wish it away. Maybe to point them to other areas where armies have been deeply involved in politics and say, have those societies become necessarily better societies? Have we learned any lessons from there? And many people in the NRM, I think Mr. Dombo here, the NRM signed a political alliance with the Chinese Communist Party. I think it's a good place to learn because the Chinese Communist Party had a red army the same way the NRM has its UPDF. And at the end of Mao's reign, the Communist Party realized that the Red Army had actually eaten the Communist Party and eaten at the political order, and they did away with it and decided to reorganize their politics through the political realm. So maybe the NRM...
And also think of where they are now.
Yes. So maybe the NRM needs to have this conversation. I mean, if you have a caucus meeting on Monday, you can say, can we pause for 30 minutes and actually have this conversation? Can the High Command and Defense Council of the UPDF
you
come?
You want to go to this microphone and are you telling the public that the UPDF is property of the NRM?
They appropriated it.
Abdu, they are democratic aspirations.
In the law, it's not, but it
they are
is theirs
democratic
in
aspirations. But to be fair, the UPDF has not yet shared all aspects of it being the NRA. It's still a very...
No.
Yes.
Why? Let's ask the senior lawyer, senior counsel. Honorable Abdul Katuntu, do you, from deep down your heart, believe that the army does not belong to NRM?
It shouldn't, because the law says so. And I'm here. And let me tell you, I can't be here. Yeah, because you see, this UPDF is established under the 1995 Constitution.
Even the Constitution.
And even the name changed. Why did the name change from NRA to UPDF? Because it was doing exactly what Raymond is talking about, shedding off that partisanship, that history. So look here, we now have a national army, two, governed by the Constitution and the rules, national rules, and not party rules. So really, to me, this is how I want to look at it. That this, and that's what I demand.
But the law.
That's what I demand, yes, and I have all the right to say, look here. As far as I know, according to the new constitutional order, starting in 1995, the UPDF is a national army, which all of us should be proud of, and not a partisan army. And whatever partisan things they are doing is unconstitutional, it is illegal, and we have to point it out.
I think that the law.
I should tell my listeners to be educated in a manner by which Abdul answers questions. So I hope to take it up.
He has answered it very well. The question,
real anger.
The question you asked,
Oscar, I want the law.
You asked him whether he believes deep in his heart that UPDF does not belong to NRM, and he said it shouldn't. Yeah. So which he asked the other answer. Yes, the answer was
that is an aspirational answer.
Raymond, finish off your 2 minutes.
For me, for example, I come from Toro, and many Toro officers who are members of UNLF AD chose not to fight the NRA. They chose to accept it immediately and enter concession with it, and became members of the NRA.
Disaster.
Sometimes, consequently, members of the UPDF, and then they were rationed down and removed from the army. These are the people that Katuntu says are getting 3,000. So they are political realities of the day. There's the law, for example, that says borders should not ride on pavements, but the political reality of Kampala is that borders are on pavements, and to enforce the law creates a relationship.
The speed fines will not cut.
Yes, it creates a relationship between the borders and the law. And every time, yes, every time,
that's what you are telling me, because they are riding on the pavement.
Unfortunately,
say, by the way, border is okay. They are pavement riders.
Maybe let me just finish this point.
Because
unfortunately, in Uganda,
yes,
every time the relationship between the law and the army has come into question, the violence of the day has won. I've just told you, the GSU, in 1969, Obote's assassination attempt, the following day, you had a different army from what people thought was the Ugandan army. There were now officers who had been brought into the corps that previously were not. UPC mobilized UPC wingers and brought them into the army. The army overnight came from 40,000 to 150,000. And you had these people deployed on the streets, deployed on the roads to enforce order. So those things, those are the political realities of the day. That if we insist that the Constitution says the army is below the Constitution, it's very likely we can become a military dictatorship.
Yeah.
So can we have an actual political conversation and say, you officers of the UPDF, where do you want to stop in the politics of Uganda? And then we civilians also tell them where we think they should stop, and maybe come to a compromise and live with a compromise.
Well spoken.